The smell of coffee and bacon grease had become as familiar to 12-year-old Marcus as his own heartbeat. Every evening at 6:47 p.m., not 6:45, not 6:50, but exactly 6:47, he would press his face against the steamed window of Rosie's diner on the corner of 5th and Madison. Inside, families laughed over milkshakes, businessmen loosened their ties over meatloaf specials, and the world seemed warm and full. Outside, Marcus stood with hollow cheeks and shoes 2 sizes too small, watching a life he couldn't quite reach. He never asked for anything. He never knocked on the glass or held out his hand. He simply watched, trying to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. And every single night without fail, Rosie Martinez would catch his eye through that foggy window, shake her head with a smile that carried equal parts sorrow and love, and mouth the same 2 words, "Come in." Marcus had been coming to Rosie's window for 3 months before she first invited him inside. 3 months of silent vigils, of watching other people's happiness from the cold. His mother had disappeared 6 months earlier, leaving only a note that said she'd be back soon. His father had never been in the picture at all. The foster system was trying to find him, but Marcus had learned that sometimes slipping through the cracks was safer than being caught. He slept in the abandoned building 2 blocks over, the one with the broken window on the 3rd floor that nobody seemed to notice. He washed his face in gas station bathrooms and kept his few belongings in a backpack he'd found behind a school. The first time he walked through Rosie's door, the bell chimed like a question mark. Every head turned. Marcus froze, suddenly aware of his dirty jacket and the hole in his jeans. But Rosie simply pointed to the corner booth, the one with the red vinyl, seat patched with duct tape, and said, "That's your spot, sit." She brought him meatloaf, mashed potatoes swimming in gravy, green beans that actually tasted like something, and a slice of apple pie that made his eyes water. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said, her accent thick with the Puerto Rico she'd left 30 years ago. "But you do have to eat. Every bite." That corner booth became Marcus's sanctuary. Every evening he'd arrive at 6:47, and Rosie would have something waiting. She never made a show of it, never drew attention. She'd simply slide a plate in front of him, sometimes ruffling his hair, sometimes saying nothing at all. Her husband, Tom, a quiet man with kind eyes and flour permanently under his fingernails, would occasionally sit down across from Marcus and tell him stories about his own childhood, about being hungry, about the people who'd helped him. "Kindness isn't charity," Tom would say. "It's just remembering that we're all human, that we all need someone." The other regulars began to notice. Mrs. Chen, who came in every Tuesday for the chicken pot pie, started bringing books she said her grandson had outgrown. Danny, the construction worker who always ordered the triple-stack burger, would leave an extra $5 bill under his plate, winking at Rosie when he thought no one was looking. Even grumpy Mr. Peterson, who complained about everything from the coffee temperature to the music volume, began ordering 2 desserts instead of 1, mumbling something about having a sweet tooth while sliding the second plate toward Marcus's booth. Months passed. Fall turned to winter, and Marcus started to look different. His cheeks filled out. His eyes brightened. He began helping out in the kitchen after his meals, washing dishes, taking out trash, listening to Rosie's stories about her 3 daughters. "All grown now, all successful. You remind me of my youngest," she'd tell him. Stubborn, proud, scared to need people. She'd tap his chest gently, but smart enough to know when to accept love. Then came the evening that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late January, one of those brutal winter nights when the cold cuts through your clothes and settles in your bones. The diner was nearly empty, just Marcus in his corner, booth and a new customer, a man in an expensive charcoal suit who looked distinctly out of place in the worn-down establishment. He'd been typing furiously on his laptop for over an hour, barely touching his coffee. Marcus paid him little attention, focused instead on the geometry homework Mrs. Chen had brought him, determined to keep up even though he hadn't been to school in months. The man in the suit suddenly stood, gathering his things. As he approached the register to pay, he paused, watching Rosie wrap a turkey sandwich in aluminum foil. "For later," she explained to no one in particular, but Marcus knew it was for him, his midnight meal for when the hunger came back. The man's eyes moved from the sandwich to Marcus, then back to Rosie. He paid his bill, left a generous tip, and walked out without a word. Marcus thought nothing of it. But the man came back the next night, and the night after that, always sitting in the same spot, always watching with those sharp, calculating eyes. On the fourth night, he finally approached Marcus's booth. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Marcus shrugged, suspicious but curious. The man extended his hand. "My name is David Chen. I'm Catherine Chen's son." Marcus's heart jumped. Mrs. Chen's son, the lawyer she was always bragging about. "My mother told me about you," David continued, his voice softer now. "And I've been watching how Rosie and Tom treat you, watching how you help out without being asked, watching how you study that math homework, like your life depends on it." He leaned forward. "I did some digging, Marcus. I know you're in the system. I know you're hiding, and I know you're afraid." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was it. He'd be sent away. The only safe place he'd found in months would disappear. But David held up his hand. "I'm not here to turn you in. I'm here to help. If you'll let me." David pulled out a folder thick with papers. "I've been working on something. A non-profit for kids like you, kids who fall through the cracks. We provide housing, education, mentorship, real support, not just temporary patches." His eyes glistened. "You see, I was once that kid looking through the window. Different city, different diner, but the same hunger, the same fear. A kind stranger helped me, paid for college, gave me a chance, and I've spent my entire career trying to pay that forward." What Marcus didn't know was that David Chen wasn't just any lawyer. He was one of the most successful civil rights attorneys in the state, a millionaire who'd built his fortune defending the forgotten and the overlooked. And he'd been coming to Rosie's diner because he was opening his nonprofit's first residential home right here in the neighborhood. He'd been looking for the first kid who truly needed it, someone who embodied resilience, someone who reminded him of himself. That someone was Marcus. The next 3 hours changed Marcus's life. David explained everything: a full scholarship program, a safe place to live, counseling, job training for the future. But most importantly, a family, not a replacement for what Marcus had lost, but a new community built on the same principle that had saved David years ago, that every child deserves a champion. Rosie cried as she listened, gripping Tom's hand. "He's still eating here," she declared. "Every single day. No fancy program is taking away my boy's dinners." David laughed, tears in his own eyes. "I wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Martinez. In fact, I'd like to make it official. Rosie's Diner is now the official meal provider for the Chen Foundation's youth program. You'll be feeding a lot more hungry kids." 2 years later, Marcus sat in that same corner booth, but everything had changed. He was 14 now, thriving in school, living in a warm apartment with 3 other boys from the program, all of them healing together. David had become his legal guardian, but Rosie remained his heart. The diner had expanded, a whole section now dedicated to the Foundation's kids, a place where hungry children could always find a meal and a smile. On this particular evening, Marcus watched as a new girl pressed her face against the window at exactly 6:47 p.m. She had that same look he remembered, hollow, hungry, hopeful. He caught Rosie's eye and smiled. Together they mouthed the same 2 words toward the window, an invitation that would echo forever. "Come in." The bell chimed. The girl hesitated at the threshold, and Marcus stood up from his corner booth, ready to pay forward every kindness he'd received, ready to prove that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is a warm meal and someone who refuses to let you stay invisible. Because he'd learned the truth that Rosie and Tom and David all knew, that kindness isn't a transaction. It's a transformation, and it ripples outward, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand, creating chains of compassion that can change the world, one hungry child at a time.